that they, of course, that they engaged in large scale agriculture. So flooding of the land was a disincentive to them being able to find the land economically feasible, the ownership of that land. And a successfully run, right here, a successfully run village would have attracted more farmers away from the plantation. Remember, these plantations were still being run by indentured persons who were brought from India, but they still needed to keep some of the emancipated persons there. So they instituted all kinds of means to keep them around and to have them not able to become successful farmers. They also, I think the owners did not really account for or reason within the cost of infrastructure, and the plantation owners or the government had to be called in to assist with infrastructure. Then they levy taxes on them. Levy taxes on them. I know of cases where, in as recent as the 1950s, lots of persons who bought land lost their land for not being able to pay the cost of the rates and taxes which cover the infrastructural costs. Because in the same village where I live, there's some land that was purchased by other persons who, from the owners who could not pay the cost of infrastructure. So that's another way in which land was lost. The other issue is with the flooding of lands and the unsustainability of agriculture. Well, for many reasons, a lot of the male Africans sought other means of livelihood, like going to the working timber and gold and so on. In that way, the land was devoid of that much attention, and things like prescription and so on happened. Yeah? There's some people who say, there's an article I have here from the Kaichor News in 2012, says that we allowed much of our ancestral lands to be lost through prescriptive title. Well, it's not, I suppose, not a case of allowing, but the laws were there to allow for that. But then the other thing is, we were not, should I say, savvy, or we were not trained enough to know what we had to do to prevent those things from happening.
Marge,
Another,
can I interrupt a bit? And
yes.
you mentioned quite a lot there so far, but if we can reel back a bit, you said that there were attempts to dissuade our poor parents from buying these lands by raising the cost of the land, one, those abandoned plantations, one, and two, by limiting the number of people who could have come together, because, you know, our parents, they actually were forming what we could have considered cooperative units, because I remember reading a manifesto for the people, from the people of Victoria. When you look at that manifesto and the laws under which they operated, they were very similar to the cooperative, what we know as a cooperative movement today. How significant was that towards trying to curtail? No, because we're looking at the orders they had to go through. And how did they get past that, those orders? If you can elaborate a bit more, because I mean, it's quite a lot of information you're giving, but we need to really zoom in on some of these things so that people can understand what took place.
My internet is unstable. You said you wanted me to elaborate on how they were able to to
get
get
past,
around.
yes, those restrictions toward of purchasing the lands?
Well, I cannot answer you that whether they bought it at a later time or what. I really do not, I'm not very sure about how they got around those hurdles in those particular instances. I have just, I've read it in Raymond Smith, I think, but I didn't read further as to see, he didn't say how they conquer those hurdles. But I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that and maybe come up with that answer at a later time. But I know, as you say, it was the the purchasing of these lands was an act of, or some similar to a really massive, successful cooperative movement. And it did take place very many places on the coast of Guyana, on the coastland of Guyana. Because as I think, I'm not for sure, I haven't done the research, but I would assume that most of the people living on the East Coast, in villages like Nabaclis and Buxton and so on, live on land owned by their ancestors, or somebody else's ancestor, you know. And that in itself is something that is worthy of recognition. And the other thing I want to say about prescription, um, which is not a law that is, should I say, operates only in Guyana. It's more or less a global thing. Lots of places this happens, and it has been under attack recently. I have something from a law case which says that it's being attacked. But beside that, I think that the actions of those emancipated Africans should have, and we still should see whether this can happen, should attract the recognition that has been accorded to the land owned by indigenous people, land settled by indigenous people. Because I think it was a great sacrifice to have been brought here, not of your own free will, and then to turn around and be able to find ways of accommodating yourself. And it should have had, and that should have been it should have attracted some kind of respect to accord it the kind of security of tenure accorded to indigenous people's lands, so as not to allow it to be a prescriptive title to be able to be accorded for those lands, or at least make all those areas land registration areas. In some cases, that is so, and there is no prescription except the owners turn their backs completely, you know. And I think that there was the COI a few years ago, and there is a report which I don't know how widely distributed or widely read it is, but I think that was one of the suggestions, and I don't know what has happened there, but I think we need to examine that, because that will in no way assist uh, in the further loss, preventing the further loss of African Guyanese lands. Um, I remember there is this issue about this large estate in West Berbice, which has of which so much has been lost. If that had been, if those laws were not in place, that could not have happened. You know? And we need to work on that. The other issue about some African Guyanese lands is that, for example, I know in many cases on the East Bank, West Bank, and in West Berbice, where a number of persons bought land, the land was configured, the ownership was configured in such a manner, so it is in a manner which is not, should I say, not conducive to any kind of serious, viable economic activity, neither farming nor building of a housing development or anything like that. This is what I mean. If 80 persons bought this land, and this land was just 80 rods wide, everybody got 1 rod in width. But the depth of the land is 750 rods. I mean, I'm exaggerating for emphasis, saying 80 and 1. But the depth of the land is really from the sea, as I said, sea to creek or river to conservancy. And it's usually 750 rods. So you have a bit of land that is 1 rod wide by 750 rods long. Doesn't make for any kind of serious economic use. According to a friend of mine, it's just a railway concession. And we have many such cases, even in the village where I live and on the West Bank that I know of, and in West Berbice. I've seen pieces of land that are just 28 feet wide. And as far as I'm aware, that there needs to be some attention paid to that. I am aware that there's the Decade for People of African Descent, and one of the, I think one of the, I don't know, mantras or whatever is supposed to be done is the removal of impediments to African development, economic development, and that is an impediment. So I know of people who have 13 acres of land and it's 5 rods wide by 750 rods long, and a number of them side by side. But we need to arrange for that to be changed. So you can get out of these 13 acres, you can get a few, maybe 3, 4 acre blocks or something like that. It's possible to work that out. And I think, well, there's so much history that can be, we can talk about. I mean, it makes good reading for what happened. But I would like to, should I say, I would like to emphasize more on what should happen, what the future should be. And sometime in 2007, a group of us decided to establish a little register, something called the Empowerment Trust, and the purpose of that trust was to educate and assist persons, African Guyanese persons, and maybe any other person who has these problems, and to guide them as to how these things can be solved. It, of course, will have to have some legal involvement. And I was told by some legal professionals that I want to take bread out of the lawyer's mouth. But it is not so. It is just working as a facilitator, educating people, letting them understand the legal landscape, of these things, and the practical ways in which they can protect their land, even if they live in Northwest and their land is in Berbice, what they can do to protect it from being taken by prescription. Because if you don't do the right thing at the right time, even the lawyer can't help you. So we do exist, we have been working, and we can be reached through our numbers. my number and Brother Amobi's number, so that we have done a lot of work to help people who, especially, as a matter of fact, we've been working with some people from overseas, Guyanese, who have land and have not done what they should do with it. And we try to intercept it before it gets too late. Because see, land is the basis of generational wealth. And we are saying that we want to educate young people in particular, so we will put out a few pamphlets with a list of things that you should know. And you can get these pamphlets and our numbers in about 2 weeks' time from the African Association for Culture and Development, African Cultural Development Association. Yes, Brother Mobi.
Okay, Sister Marge, you mentioned something, this reconfiguration of the lands. You said, for instance, a piece of land 2 rods wide by 750 feet deep. Well, 13 acres. What works out to be about 13 acres?
No, actually, the 2 was just an exaggeration for emphasis.
Yeah.
Usually they're about
13 acres with only a bit of two rods, 1 long strip of land.
Sorry, no. The 13 acres would be 5 rods wide by 750 rods. That gives you 13. 5 rods wide.
5 rods wide. 5 rods work out to be just about 70 feet.
61.78 feet.
61 feet, right? So now if you have that, and a tractor is supposed to be working on that land, you will have to leave, or you need to work that land. You'll have to leave a path, a roadway for the tractor to be traveling to and fro, right? So that roadway will virtually be about 10 feet out of your 60 feet. So you have only a strip of 50 feet, which you can till.
Yes.
Maximum, right? But if you could have, let's say, make it, instead of 5 rods, make it 20 rods wide so now it will now be just about 100 and something rods deep. Right? So then you can now, if you divide that up, so now you have a wider piece of land from which, if you take a strip out for road, you will have much more arable area for planting, if it's agriculture you want to do.
Yeah.
I think that is the kind of reconfiguration I think we should be going into, right? And should be encouraged, because as we all know, you go into in the Maikoni area, people talking about they got a piece in first depth, second depth, third depth, 1 strip. And the front piece, some of them, it's just about 1 house lot wide, because it might have been 4 or 5 brothers to that original owner. So each brother or each son or daughter, I said it should be brother or sister, gets a strip 1 house lot wide and goes down, 750 rods. So if we had reconfigured, it could have been blocks of 4 acres or 3 acres, whatever, each being 10, 20 rods wide going down.
But this makes the case for intermediary roads and drains and canals. You've got, when you cut up and you got to put in, you got to collaborate in the first place. So if I've got a 5 rod and then my neighbor has
your volume in.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes. For example, we have got in where there's a piece of land 5 rods wide. Immediately to the south, there's another person with 5 rods. To the other, to the north, another one with 5. Further down, another one with 5. If the four or five persons came together, then you will decide where to put an access road going in one direction. And then, of course, nobody wants to get all their land at the back. So what you have to do is make intermediary roads and drains. So as you go down, and somebody who gets a piece in the front, a square in the front, 4 acres in front, will get 4 acres at the back or whatever. But there are many, many ways of addressing this. And so as to
Yes, well,
achieve
we
equity
understand that.
and access.
In fact, I had forgotten that you need drainage and irrigation for those lands. So now if you have to drain and irrigate that same 5 rods wide, then apart from the dam that you'll have to travel, you'll have to establish a drain, which will have to run the full depth. And because it will have to drain off water from all that depth, it will have to carry a certain width. Also, to irrigate it, you'll need a certain width. So then you're taking away. So eventually you may only have practically 30-something feet or 3 rods to cultivate all of that depth. But if you had it in wider blocks, then you have much more area to cultivate on in a more practical way. So it's important.
I should just want to read this little bit of information here that written some time ago. By the year 1852, emancipated Africans had owned 25 villages and had erected 2,000 private dwellings. It is said, it has been interesting to find out that in 1847, Peter's Hall, Farm, and Garden of Eden were purchased by free Africans. It will be useful to find out how Garden of Eden became a drainage and irrigation area under the Guyana administration. See, that was Garden of Eden. And look at the configuration of Garden of Eden as against the configuration of land owned by these villages south of Garden of Eden on the East Bank. You go into these main access roads, and the roads and the lands given out are a minimum. They're 7-acre blocks. As you go east, and as you go further east, you have 25-acre blocks. And the minimum access you have is, facade you have, the frontage is 300 odd acres. 300 odd feet for this, So it is land that is workable, and that land has drainage and irrigation. All the other lands in these villages coming south of that on the East Bank have no such thing. What you have is a canal with a coker and a dam next to it, and then a string of these railway concessions. Then you get another coker and another set, So that is the story of our lives when it comes to the land that we have. Of course, in many cases, the ownership has changed. If I look at the ownership 1887 plan of the ownership of Perico, which was bought by 4 African men, the story of ownership now has changed immensely.
Yes.
Luckily,
Sister Marjorie, can I interrupt again? I had earlier asked how did these our ancestors, foreparents were able to negotiate these restrictions in numbers. Now you said Perico 4 persons bought it. If we go back to Kojo McPherson, when he bought Hope Town, and you said 4 persons bought those 4 villages each on the East Bank. those persons were entrusted with monies from other former enslaved persons. They were entrusted with monies from the other people within the community. And as
I
Kojo
want to
did,
believe so.
when
Yes.
Kojo bought that community, that plantation, it was then divided in 8. So effectively, Kojo bought it for on behalf of those 8 people, or 8 front people, because some of them further subdivided theirs again. So
yeah, that is true. That is true. Yes, so, most likely.
There was some amount of trust among our foreparents, which today is very, very much lacking among us today. Because I am sure if you ask any of the brothers and sisters on the line, for the crowd, we are not many, we are 8 online, that if we should nominate one person to take $5,000 from each of us and give it to that person, how many of us will volunteer to give that person that money to hold until next month? With the hope that we will get it back.
That is true, Brother Moby, because as you said that, I recall that Friendship on the East Bank, Demerara, there were 2 names on the land on Friendship, the transport of Friendship. 2 names, and the date of the transport was 1857. Just 2 names, but they recognized. I remember seeing an affidavit saying that it was what amount was given to him, what land was given to him, was for his share of the purchase money. That indicated that somewhat purchase money was given to some persons who were the trustees. And I also am aware that I have a copy of a letter of decree dated is 53 of 1890, given to my great uncle, who was given the entire plantation Parika in 1890 when they were doing all these fixing everything in order. And then he handed back to all the other owners and their annotations on that letter, giving them back their land. Maybe that was the value of the land to the value of the money that they put. So it was not just the 4 of them who pooled the money, but other persons.
Good afternoon. Can I ask a question?
Please do.
Sure.
Identify yourself.
Keith Easton, I have my name up also. All right.
Not seen a photograph.
Well, I don't think you may want to see a photograph right now.
Or a picture. Okay, no problem.
But I think
big brother Keith.
Yeah, but everyone on the Zoom here knows me. All right. Yes. Marjorie, the fire that took place recently, was that at the Parika Stelling?
Yes, it was when you're going towards the Stelling, the fire was on your right hand. That's on the eastern side.
All right. Question. Who owns that land as an ancestral land? Is it ancestral land? Passed down. The question is who, from your real estate knowledge, and as you know that I'm a realtor, who owns that land?
No, that I think was the state land because it's right at the top by the Stelling. It's opposite the police station. And it's owned by the state. That's state land.
So which means in the rebuilding of that Stelling, the state determines whether you can have another Stelling there or you can have something else there. I don't know if you see where I'm going, Brother Elton.
Well, all the hubs, should I say, the business people who own businesses there, I think they have approached the president. And I really, although I go to Parika so often, I really haven't paid much attention, but I know the people selling on the roadside. And there are some other structures that you go further east, which the government owns. All those places are owned by the government. They're state property.
All right.
And the state had asked the people to remove. That's what they were told by a minister. And they said, look what happened now. So I suppose they will be replaced somewhere by the government.
I
But
see.
the land is state land. That's state land.
Yeah, that is all. I just wanted to plant a seed, basically, at this point, in terms of ancestral lands, land ownership, and also, as you mentioned, state lands, you know, and future development. Thank you.
Very well,
You
Keith.
know, I will,
Nice to hear you.
as we, that community is formed from lands which were bought by our ancestors. And we would all recognize that in front, at the beginning or nearer to the sea coast of most of our villages, there were lands that were owned by the state, the crown, or what have you, right? Like at Pleasance, that portion where the radio station was, you know, in BV Triumph, not BV, in Triumph, you had a portion in front of the village and so on, right? Many of these lands were actually taken from the villages in lieu of the cost of D&I works, which Sister Marge mentioned, that because they may not have taken into consideration the cost of D&I, but then we're looking at a D&I which was configured based on the plantation system, where the planters were able to flood our communities at will. We had very little control of those there. Though my village, Triumph, we were the first to have instituted a draining engine, a steam power drainage system, right? But then we still had those issues where in the front of Tram, there were some lands which eventually were occupied by the Public Works Department, and there's a government compound there. Those lands, history will tell us that they were taken from the village because in lieu of not meeting the sanitation requirements with regards to drainage, right? And this happened to several other villages along the coast. So I don't know if it's the same thing that has happened to Parika, where that front portion was taken because of the same reason, or maybe because of the selling from Transport and Harbors Department, it was taken by force majeure. I do not know the history of why that area became state-owned. But it's good for some student to start researching how our lands became the property of the government eventually.
Yeah, that's
Yes, I have a
our
copy of the plan of
village land.
Parika.
that's
Here's
a
a copy
very
of the-
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I have a copy of the plan of Parika, excuse me, John. The plan of the shores. Parika from Parika to Hydroni. And if I can find where that's the outfall channel. And that's Hydroni. Drainage and irrigation reserve. And I'm looking to see where the public road is. There is this where you turn off. It's a very small map, but they've got, it's got, I am not sure, it doesn't say that it's the state reserve, but there are 2 wide parcels of land leading down to the drainage irrigation reserve, which is on the river, and which empties into the river. But what I do know, I'll check that out later. But it's most likely state land anyway.
And if this discussion continues another time and have it, because I personally think this kind of discussion cannot end today, right? Because there are so many things that will come in that we know has happened to our lands. Almost every village have a different story, right? About what has happened to our lands and how we can, because at the end of the day, as Sister Marge, you mentioned, we need the way our village lands are supposed to be treated should be similar to the way the Amerindian lands are being dealt with. Excuse me.
Yeah.
That, I think, should be the focus of us as a people in this, because we keep losing our lands.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
unless there is some protection mechanism within it, we will lose some more.
Mm-hmm. Look, I have spent 12 years in court trying to assist an old man who we grew up seeing, Uncle Cardi next to us, who was applying for 17 acres of land from some land that he was in his ancestry. They all bought it together. A place called Sparta or Bartonstein. It is just after Mura. And of course, I got some opposition from some other people who came in as well, the provocateurs and that. I gave up an acre and a half of it in his while he was alive, so as to get it. And whatever, I am still the executor with the land to be passed on to myself and two other persons. Recently, about less than a year ago, I saw an invitation to tender for the road bordering the eastern side of the land to be done, road and drain. But then subsequently somebody asked me, oh, is you somebody from Puerto Rico? Inquired me, oh, you all are part of the people who own the land. I'm only a small part of it because the land consists of about 100 and something acres. And later I saw it removed. They're not bothering to do it. However, I will, from that piece of land, I will dedicate 1 acre of land to any young group of people who are interested in land, who want to come and do something there. Because as you see, I am more out than in, right? My birthday this year, I'll be 79. And I want to encourage young people to get involved in these things. You know? There's another little experience that I've had. Puerto Rico was made a land registration area in the 70s, early 70s, yes, early 70s. And there's a large reserve going right through, if you're familiar with it, south of the facade trench. That's a trench that is a very important drainage trench. And that reserve is supposed to be a reserve for the Del Conte Road. And would you believe it? And well, this land had all belonged to these various owners, including my ancestors. But there are people who have nothing to do with this land, who have gone there and squatted and built substantial houses, 2 flat concrete and wooden houses, and renting it to Venezuelan people. And the NDC and people are not doing anything about it. See? So
I was about to ask why if there was an NDC operating in that neighborhood. So how they built without the permission? How they built on lands that are not owned by them?
Yeah, they build, well, the NDC, I don't know, they choose to, I don't know how that NDC is run. But
colleagues,
it's a strange issue.
When there's a chance.
Pardon?
No, I was saying I would like to speak when time permits.
Of course, Dr. Stimson, you can speak.
Supposed to be an open discussion.
You are welcome to speak.
I've heard. I must say that this discussion is very timely and we should have it much more often and take necessary actions. I've heard it mentioned that we don't know, or the NDC is not doing anything I would like to say that the NDC is doing something. They're allowing those squatters to squat. They're allowing those builders to build. And they are allowing them to take away our ancestors' lands. And I am agreeing with what was said previously, that ancestors' lands should be protected, just like how you have the protection of Amerindian land that is assigned. And we should demand that greatest, highest level of protection be given to ancestral land, because the fact is that whatever had happened in the 1800s and even the 1700s, which was the blood of our ancestors that are everywhere, there's no group like us as Africans, African Guyanese, who our foreparents got together and bought those lands and occupied those lands. There's absolutely and categorically no reason why those lands should be taken away. However, it is what is happening right now throughout the length and breadth of Guyana, not only in the far-fetched areas or the far-to-reach areas, but even right within our towns and our coastal villages / communities. There must be some urgent mechanism and team be put together to stop it. We are hearing a lot of so-called talk, but the doing is lacking. I am saying a state of emergency should be declared among us, and we fight feverishly to protect the rights that we have. We're not talking about discrimination and racism, us against anyone. We're talking about protecting, defending, and making sure that our rights are not violated. And unfortunately, that is what is happening before our eyes. There's a window of opportunity, I must admit, but I don't know if we're making appropriate use of it, and I urge that we do. There is in May coming up, there's a second
decade.
I'm sorry, may I?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes,
yeah, go ahead.
The second United Nations meeting of people of African descent. That is the working group for people of African descent who had come together and wrote about an operation guideline for the inclusion of people of African descent in sustainable development and the sustainable development goals. For you to be part of the sustainable development, in Guyana case, the low carbon development strategy 2030, you have to have land. And land, fortunately, is what we have. But what is happening right now, our lands are being taken away from us by the state. And we appear to be like toothless poodles. I am asking of us, because the United Nations has, through, at least at this time, it's Parity and other stakeholders are entitled to go and present the cases before the United Nations of discrimination, marginalization, Afrophobia, and all these things that we know about, so that consideration would be given for formal representation. So I'm saying to us, in addition to what we are doing, trying to represent ourselves here, and we must in very organized ways, let us make use of the regional and international bodies that it was agreed to by the way of resolutions since 2015. As a matter of fact, the inclusion of people of African descent in this agenda was full tested in Ecuador and Peru in December 2020, and now is implementation time. So it's appropriate environment, especially when our government is speaking about Guyana becoming a model for sustainable development to the world. And that model is about inclusion, inclusion of all. But the United Nations specifically cleared, and all the presidents agreed, inclusion of people of African descent. So I'm asking of us to take into consideration that document, which is the operational guidelines for the inclusion of people of African descent in the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development. All our land issues are protected under that. And we should have that as one of our main instruments to educate our people in the villages, and let us rally together to defend our heritage. I'm just signaling that there's need for urgent action now. And some of us should be present in New York at the UN to make our case and make strong cases, so that in the extension of the decade, and this whole decade specifically says that the government has a responsibility to, in the budget allocation, cater for the people of African descent, and if needs be, for extra budgetary financing that should be put in place. So we ought to be putting pressure via our people in the communities to, one, educate themselves, and two, take the necessary appropriate action by the NDCs, by private sector, civil society, faith-based organizations, private sector, and all us other stakeholders. We need to be talking, acting, and solving the problems in our communities now. To me, it is what our ancestors in 1763, 1823, and you come down the line, that is what they fought for.
Thank you, my brother. That contribution is very significant. Yes, I will agree that what you have said should be enacted. We should make attempts to have our case be heard at the highest forum on earth, the United Nations, because it's, unless that is done, we may be fighting a battle on our own without any kind of assistance. Because as it is in Guyana, the powers that be will like to see our lands taken away from us. They are encouraging it. And we as a people need to start thinking of what happens to our generation in the future. What we can do, because the program should really be for 1 hour, and we have stepped past that 1 hour. What I will do is try to stay another 10 minutes or so that if any of those who are sitting in the corners without saying anything may want to make a comment or two, and Sister Marge to respond to what the brother just said.
Well, yes, Simpson, that is a very, very, very useful contribution. I know a little about what was supposed to be, what is in future, or the future activity of the towards going to the UN or to Geneva or wherever. And I recognize that we need to get together and get this on this program properly or properly spelled out so it can be put forward. There was another issue oh, that I would like to have raised, that is, you know, in the reparations movement, there was a proposal that as reparatory justice, Guyanese, African Guyanese be given 18% of the land of Guyana's land. I don't know that that has been tabled anywhere, how it's been taken. And I was told that this proposal of reconfiguring coastal lands and looking after coastal land is inessential, it's not necessary because we're going to get this 18%. But I am concerned about the practicality and the practicability of something like that. But even if that were to happen, we still got about 50 to 100 years before that can become you know, should I say, a workable reality. So I don't know if that too, that proposal can be taken also to the UN. I don't know. When we meet, we can talk about that, Brother Simpson. But yes,
I
Brother Moby.
agree that with the reparations proposal, this is primarily because we were here, everybody else in Guyana has had what we can call reparations. The Europeans got reparations when that period of enslavement ended. They were compensated for the lands, they were compensated for their properties, meaning our foreparents. They were compensated for all of their investment. The people who came subsequently, the Portuguese came, they were compensated by being granted business license when our people could not have gotten business license. They were compensated by the government of Madeira to get into business, right? The others who came after were compensated in some ways or the other. The East Indians, they came by way of a contract to be paid for their labor, and so were they. Also, they were given monies to go back home. Those who refused to go back home were then compensated by way of some equivalent sum to, and
villages,
so they had land.
Number of villages.
They had settlements, they were called. Bath settlement was one, Tain settlement. All of these settlements were in the Mica area. There was a settlement also for supply. I think it was, I may be wrong.
Jealousy.
Right. They were given lands, right, on which to build. So our people, we were dragged there without our permission. We came here without, people brought us here, and we worked and were just allowed to wander, come off the plantation in August of 1838 without any sort of compensation. The lands we owned, we had to buy them. And when we attempted to buy them, people started to jack up the prices so as to make it more difficult for us to buy it. So when we bought those lands, our lands were flooded because we did not control the DNI system. We were made to forced to go back onto the plantation to work whenever they needed by destabilizing our village economies and so on, right? So we need reparations. We must be recompensed for all the harm, all the sufferings our people went through. So that 18% of Guyana is equivalent to the area that we cleared on the coast, that equivalent area, which we did by basically manual labor, right? So we actually cleared these lands and we had to buy them back. Now, so to give us an equivalent of what our labors were, we will take 80% of the land mass of Guyana and 18% of the sea rights of Guyana. We should also be given, we should be considered for parts of the sea where the oil is. We should be given some sort of rights to do that too. Okay.
Indeed,
so in closing, as I said, if anybody, any one of those listening or sitting in the Zoom may want to make a comment, your opportunity is now, so that, but what I will want to do, because I know this topic is not expired, being ACDA Hour is a once a month program. If you wish, we can do it next month again, continue this next month at the ACDA Hour, or if you feel that we need to, we can put another day and let's continue this discourse. It's up to those who are on the Zoom. It happened that my Facebook link got broken down, so I had to switch over to my phone. I don't know what's happened to my computer. Something happened there, and the link to Facebook and the link I started on the phone on the computer went. So I was forced to continue on the phone only. Yes. So if anyone has a comment or two before we close, no, I will be happy, or I just ask Sister Marge to make her closing comments on all that happened and the way, and maybe recommend the way forward to future programs, so we can divide it up. Discourse on this topic.
Well, I thank all the good people who may have been listening, and I hope we made some sense, and I recognize that, well, if you're listening, you understand the meaning, the sacred meaning of us, of African Guyanese and land in Guyana. You know, what we have done to acquire land and how we must respect that and regard that. And I just want to give you a little story. You know, I come from a bushy place. I mean, more than water and bush, Puerto Rico, which is not really like that anymore. And I got interested in land when I came to Georgetown, because I lived with an aunt who was concerned about the fact that we lost most of our ancestral land left by my great-grandfather, who died in 1885, that momentous year when Africa was chopped up in pieces. And as a matter of fact, it was left in four shares, one to her eldest brother, whose land is still there, and three to her mother, and a third death to all of them. And she was the last one and the most educated one, and she was happy that her nephew became a canon in the Anglican Church, and gave him the transport, and he borrowed money and didn't pay back, and they lost all the land. So my aunt, when I went to school in 1956, this thing happened about in the late 1940s, was still talking about this issue. Every week she would talk about it, and that whetted my interest in land. That is what caused me to be interested in land, because of my aunt's concern about how we lost our land. So we want to get other young people interested and let them recognize. I think I'm getting some of my young relatives who live abroad and for whom I am managing that great uncle's land in Puerto Rico, the 30 acres left there, for them. And they now recognize how important it is. So, and I would like to see young people not think of land as a house lot, but to think of land as at least a half an acre or something, and try to see how best they can try to get land applied to the government, applied to the state, whatever, to get some land of their own and own a part of Guyana. Thank you for listening, and we have work to do.
So Marge, thank you very much for devoting your time for this lesson in land. And I hope that, well, there are no suggestions for us to meet prior to next month's ACDA Hour. So I hope that I can beg you to return, and you will return. I see. So thanks very much. And thank you all for being part of this. Again, I must apologize for not being able to have it streamed live on Facebook, but definitely I will, what I've recorded, be putting up on Facebook soon, because even because I did not set this phone to be recording from the beginning, right? So only a portion of what this discourse will go on Facebook. And I thank you all once more. And as a former colleague would say, Aluta Continua. That is Sister Dr. Joyce Long,
Yes.
Aluta Continua. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
Simpson, we have to do some work. A lot
And
of work.
Simpson, maybe you can meet with Sister Marge. I will volunteer to be there if you guys give me a time, and so we can work out on that document for the UN May month meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good, excellent. Thank you.
Mr. King, you just came in when we were about to say goodbye. Bye-bye. It will be on Facebook soon.
Okay.